Welcome to San Diego Integral, May 8th, 2021. Our topic this month is the highly sensitive person and we space, presented by Tom Habib, Ph.D. And now our host, Liz O'Grady.
I'm Liz O'Grady. I'm part of the San Diego Integral Leadership Team. I'm going to be acting as host today. Today, our topic is part of the IEC, the Integral European Conference. We're really excited to have sort of a preview today. And we'd like to invite you to consider attending. It is May 19th through 23rd. It's online, so you can attend from anywhere in the world. Anyway, our presenter is going to be presenting at the IEC as well, so we're getting a preview. Before we do that, though, I wanted to welcome new people. Oh, and also I'm going to put the link for the IEC in the chat, so that's there. We'll post it again, but for those of you who are interested, it's a great conference. So we'd like to welcome new people. If you haven't attended before, we'd love for you to just say a quick hi, tell us your name, where you're calling in from, quick how you heard about us. If you maybe heard through Eloy, he's very well known in this group. But yeah, you just unmute yourself and say hello. One other thing, we do ask you to be muted through the most of the meeting. If you prefer to not be on video, we will be recording this meeting. If you prefer not to be on video, you can turn off your camera. But we'd love to see your faces, so do keep it on if you don't mind. So who would like to say hi? We'd like to welcome you.
Well, it's Ian here. I'll say hi. It's my first meeting here. Thanks to Tom, who's invited me. We were at both of the Integral Practitioner Convergence a few weeks ago. So looking forward to this. Thanks.
Welcome, Ian. Thanks. Who else?
Hello, everybody. I'm Ildiko from Hungary, and Tom invited me too. I'm actually studying integral psychology at the moment, but I'm a lot longer been interested in working with high sensitivity. So that's why I'm here. I'm here interested in both topics. So I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
Great. Welcome. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Hovanek calling in from near Chicago. And I'm not sure how I found this group. I found it a while ago, though. My first time attending. Glad to be here.
Great. Thanks.
Welcome. Hi, I'm Eric Reynolds. I'm also here at Tom's invitation, though I'm familiar with the group and I know many of you as editor of Integral Leadership Review. And it's a pleasure to be here and look forward to hearing Tom's presentation and maybe hanging out a bit more often. So thanks for having me.
Welcome, Eric. Thanks. Who else? See a lot of familiar faces.
Hello, I'm Lisa Norton, and I'm also here for the first time today. It looks like I recognize a lot of friendly faces, and I'm also here at Tom's invitation and just happy to be here and hear the results and learn more about Tom's research, and hope to be back again.
Great. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Last call. We'd love to say hi. All right. By the way, you can always say hi in the chat and you can ask any questions if you need in the chat. We'll be kind of monitoring that. We have a couple chat hosts, so they're there to help you out in the chat department. Okay. Also, I want to mention we have a couple meetings coming up. Our June meeting is on the 12th, and that's actually going to be a recap of the IEC. So we're going to be hearing from a few of our members and a few people who attended quick pieces. So that's part of also, we'd love to encourage you to attend. We'll be inviting people to give a little recap of things that were impactful for them from the conference. And then we actually have 2 meetups in July, which is really exciting. So we'll be talking about that more at the end, a little bit of a re-invitation. And then also, if you would like information, you can go to sandiegointegral.org for our events. You can also join Meetup, our Meetup group, and Facebook to get notified so that the information comes to you. The links for that are on sandiegointegral.org. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Tom Habib, who's our member here. He's a clinical psychologist in San Juan Capistrano. He specializes in couples therapy, and he's published several papers, a couples line of development in the Integral Leadership Review, and also the role of regression and lower right supporting structures Journal of Integral Theory and Practice. He's also presented at the Integral Theory Conference and the Integral European Conference prior, and he was recognized there for the best practitioner paper, honorable mention. So he's long been involved in the integral community. So today he is going to be presenting his research on a study on highly sensitive person. And we're really excited also because many of the members participated in the survey. And so we're eager to hear the results. So take it away, Tom.
Thank you, Liz. It's great to be here finally and get this study done. I wanted to tell you a little bit why I got into highly sensitive people in that field of research. About 3 years ago, I was referred a woman with generalized anxiety and panic attacks to my practice. And I'll never forget, she came in with a bottle of Xanax, and the anxiety was palatable. I mean, you could feel it. It was making me nervous. But I could also feel her ability to make contact, although she was jittery and scared. I had been reading something about highly sensitive people, but what enabled me to connect the dots were Jean Houston's words. Some of you are familiar with Jean Houston. She once said, mythologize, don't pathologize. Mythologize, don't pathologize. And the way I took that was to think outside of the box of what could be going around. And sure enough, that's what I found is she was very positive for HSP that kind of co-mingled with a presentation that looked like generalized anxiety, with panic attacks, meaning the upper right, as we know it in integral, was totally out of control. So if we fast forward about a year down the road, she settles down really nicely. So much so that her ability to open presents, even with her 7-year-old daughter at that point, she would go to her daughter, hold one side of her face and say, look at me, and open that space. And her daughter began to say, Mom, can we do that more often? And a year down the road, now 8-year-old daughter went to her dad, grabbed him on both sides of the face, and opened that presence and said, Dad, can you feel me? I mean, it was just a remarkable trajectory that I said, I need to look at this area. And that's how I began with looking at, are there great incidents of HSP in my own community, integral community? So let me start showing you. I need share screen.
You should have it as co-host, Tom.
I don't have it. It says it's disabled.
Just a sec.
There we go.
Here we are. So here's the study, as you know. So I want to start with, what is HSP? What is a highly sensitive person? In the literature, it's called a sensory processing sensitivity. And they make a distinction that it is not a disorder. Those with HSP have emotional sensitivity, strong reactivity, both to internal and external stimuli. And we're going to distinguish that later on. For example, pain, hunger, light, noise. As a result, they have a very complex inner life. That upper left is going a mile a minute. Because of everything they're taking in, they need a lot of time to recover. I mean, that is so diagnostic. They need time alone to recover. My daughter, who's joining us today, I remember all the time she spent in a room alone growing up. They're very sensitive to other people's opinions, and they deeply feel others' trauma and violence. They usually hate movies with violence in it. On the positive side, they seem to know things that are way beyond factual information. They just get context, nuance, and the three-dimensional levels of knowing. As a result, they can open up space with resident energy when they're under control. They do great in therapy because they have so much subtle awareness. They can be outstanding in helping others with their state abilities, and they feel great providing they are a centered HSP, not one out of control. What I'm noticing, and this is perhaps a future study I'm going to do, I think 40% of people that show up for an anxiety disorder actually have HSP as a co-condition of that. Notice I'm not saying comorbidity for you that are clinicians, because I don't view this. This is a gift, providing you can run it, it doesn't run you. So here's the research questions I asked. Do integral practitioners have a greater frequency of HSP than the general population? And then secondly, are integral practitioners better adjusted than the general population? So there were 323 people from 29 countries that participated. The criteria to participate was 1 or more years involved in integral theory. And these are the people you're seeing that really helped out in getting subject. Eric, who's here today with us, Riker, I believe in South Africa, the entire IEC 2021 team. Eloy helped me with some data crunch, as did Ledico Davis, who's here today, and Pat Fox. All of them made it a lot easier to get this done. These are scores by country. Any surprises here for you? I was frankly,
Russia.
yeah, that was my feeling too, Eloy. And I was a little surprised Germany scored so high too, because remember, these are just integral folks, but so much so for my bias, with the general population at 3.95, these top 7 countries, scored the highest. And I only included it where they had a large enough sample size so that it made some sort of sense. Okay, so do integral practitioners have a higher HSP score? The quick answer is yes, they do. For those of you used to reading things scientific, this is a t-test comparison between the HSP norm and the HSP integral. And just quick by educationally, the P means that if we ran this study 1,000 times, 999 times it would come up at this level. That's a pretty high criteria for the orange scientific method. but it's either 0.05 or 0.001. It's not a huge result, but it was consistent and legitimate. So the second major question, do integral practitioners have higher well-being scores? Again, yes, but don't get too comfortable because this study blows me out of the water when I initially looked out the results. So here's a t-test on well-being scores. There's the norm, 4.58. HSP, integral people are 4.75. It's significant as all get out. The effect size is not huge, but it's totally legitimate. So the good news is we're doing better than the general population. The bad news is we got more work to do. And this is what indeed blew me out of the water. Before I tell you, I looked at the subcategories of HSP, and if you did the test, you saw these subcategories: negative affect, neural sensitivity, propensity to overwhelm. Those are the two we're going to focus on today, especially. We're not going to focus too much on negative affect because we do a ton of work in upper left in integral theory, everything from meditation to our individual practices. So, and it tends to be an upper left phenomenon. Okay, so I wanted to define these a little bit. If you got to print out some of these, you did get. So as I said, negative affect is an upper left cognitive reaction to sensory input. When you get a very, very high score, it's very easy to begin to beat yourself up because you're riding a lot of energy that isn't necessarily integrated. And this is what this research is going to show. Questions that loaded on this subcategory: do you find it unpleasant to have a lot going on at once? Or do changes in your life shake you up? So if you have your results with you, less is definitely better here, but a score of 4.5 or above is likely significant. Neural sensitivity is how your body and nervous system reacts to stimulation. This is, can you embody and regulate down or regulate up if you want a greater experience? We're going to say more about that a little later on. But how the instrument evaluates this: do you startle easily? Do other people's mood affect you? Do you find yourself needing to withdraw from relief from stimulation? 3.5 and above is likely significant. It's great to have neural sensitivity, providing you can handle it. Propensity to overwhelm, we're going to look at. It can be an all-quadrant overreaction to stimulation. The questions on the instrument: are you bothered by intense stimuli, like loud noises or chaotic scenes? 3.5 or above is likely significant. So, remember when I said it's great that we're doing better than the general population? This is part of the bad news. And this I did not expect to find. I mean, I spent a week noodling this, going, what the heck? I thought we were going to be exemplars of it. So what this is doing is showing the subcategories of HP and how they correlate with well-being. What it says, as HSP increases, well-being is decreasing. Did you get that? As HSP increases, well-being is decreasing. So we're not even doing all that great with it. There's still room for improvement in this area across the board. I suspect that there's no data right now to show how the general populations do, but I would suspect this correlation is a lot higher in the general population than it is within an ours. But again, I didn't expect to find this, at this point. So the first exercise I want to do has to do with neural sensitivity. And I found this video. It's amazing. There's over 500,000 hits on it. And all it's doing is going, Eloy, could you play that video?
Yeah, Tom, you'll have to stop the screen sharing so I can do the screen share. Oh, it's okay. Just a sec. Sorry about that.
I use this technique in therapy to quiet people, is I open a presence and get them to do it with me. It's amazing how it calms things down. And you're going to do it in a breakout in a few minutes.
Yeah, I put this in an audio file, and I should have practiced playing that first. Hold on a sec.
You want to see if I can play it from my end, Eloy?
No, I think I have it going here in a sec. Okay, sorry about that. Should be playing.
The volume isn't up.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Thank you.
Okay. I can't hear it. Can anyone else? Did anyone hear it?
I'm not hearing it.
Tom, if it's only the sound,
No.
do we really
Okay.
need a video or anything of it?
Now, why don't we skip it, Eloy?
Can you hear it now?
Yeah. Can barely hear it though. Okay. So I think you get the general idea. And what we're going to do. So let me get back to where we were.
Tom, for what it's worth, I actually thought when you made this sound, it was more effective in how I felt than listening to that audio. Seriously.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to break out into groups of 2 each. And you're only going to be in there a couple minutes, 3 minutes, this breakout, I believe. And I want you to try to make eye contact and do it for each other, at least one round, if not more. And then look for the upper right to calm down a little bit. Okay? Any quick questions? Okay.
How long would you like each person to shush?
Well, you're going to be in there 3 minutes. So just do it for a minute and a half each. If you want to try it together, do that too. So we're ready, Eloy, when you are.
Well, there's a question, Tom. What does upper right mean?
I'm sorry. What are you asking me, Eloy?
What does upper right mean?
Upper right is in the quadrant, is the physiological response you're watching as you do the okay? So that's what you're going to watch for. Okay. Let's go.
Okay, here we go.
Okay. Is everyone back?
Looks good.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
Supposed to be calming?
So, I don't know what that was.
Oh, sorry, that was me, Shiva. Is it supposed to be calming? Because since we're all calm and it felt calmer.
It was calmer. What did you notice about doing it? In fact,
Well,
that's
I noticed that initially the first time it was like harder for me, but when we're doing it together, I noticed that I would take a deep breath and then I would do the shh thing. So that was almost like a breathing exercise, which I always know helps me physiologically.
any other comments or observations?
Yes, Eileen noticed that I was rocking a little when I was doing it. And then I was aware of that and I watched her and she was rocking a little when she was doing it, like we were holding a baby.
Yeah, I found it even more calming to be doing the shh sound than to be attending to it. But then I kind of went straight into a meditation, which I meditate daily anyway. So I tended to plug right into that as soon as I started doing the breathing to do the shh sound.
I found it just felt really nice. Felt very peaceful.
I had a kind of different reaction when I was listening to the audio. I found it kind of irritating. In the person to person, it was very nice. I didn't have any particular reaction, but it wasn't a negative then.
It's funny, Lynn, when you say that, I had a gentleman that had a wife that was HSP, and I said, go ahead and when she gets really excited, go. And he said to me, you tell her to shh, and you're going to get the wrath. It actually worked out really well between the two of them. They would do it with each other. Any final comments?
To me, it felt very intimate, like really intimate. Mm-hmm.
So a little caretaking. Yeah. Anyone notice the physiological calming? I think some of you did.
Definitely. Rasmus, did you want to share? Your hand is raised.
I noticed there seemed to be a technical issue with the exercise. That the shh sound seemed to cut off, which I think might have been Zoom detecting it as noise. But I guess our voices are different, so it might have been a different experience in different rooms.
I had also an experience of being taken care of, and it felt sort of parental in a very sweet way. So my physiology calmed down, but I also felt sort of bittersweet, missing my family. So it was an interesting, relaxing, and a little bit of tension kind of alternating a little bit.
There's a few comments in the chat, Tom. Did you see those? Do you want me to read them?
Yeah, go ahead.
Kathleen says, when my partner and I shushed at the same time, we inhaled and exhaled together in a way it was to get into the resonance with each other. Patricia says you can try adjusting your audio settings, play around with original sound also. Yeah, that's good.
Well, I have a comment. I'm wondering, this is Shiva, again. I'm wondering if this, because I've been breathing when I'm walking at work to like just slow down my pace and be more calm. And I'm wondering, sometimes I just get excited about different growth things, or I want to interrupt when other people are talking because I'm excited. So I wonder if I do something like this internally, it would probably calm me down. Would you say so, Tom?
You know, I would, but it's going to be all quadrant. I'm going to try to hit some different exercises because ultimately how we show up depends upon how we're doing, you know, in all the quadrants at once. So, and especially if we're going to carry big energy, like Shiva, I know from previous meetings, you got a lot of energy. And like you said, it tends to come out verbally a lot. But yes, I think it'll accomplish what you're doing. I mean, what you're suggesting there. So let me move on and add to this. So I want to share this. So if you remember, the next subcategory was propensity to overwhelm. And one of the things I do in working with people is teaching centering. And there's a lot of definitions of what it is and different ways of doing it. But this is what I do. Simply, it's an awareness of knowing what's going on within you and what's approaching you from the outside. So when we're centered, we're well aware of our internal state. We're aware of how people are approaching us. And ultimately, we want to decide how we're going to respond. Don't I make that sound easy? But that's what I'm looking for. I'm always telling the physicians at the hospital where I do some consulting at, if you go from 0 to 60 because somebody says something you don't agree with, you're out of control. If you do that in 3 seconds flat. And you can see there isn't kind of an internal locus of control. They're reactive to everything. So when we're centered, we're able to do this. So this is going to be part of the next exercise. Remember what it is, what's going on within and outside. And what I want you to discuss in this exercise is, how do you know when to open up to something? When do you consciously withdraw, not retract or contract? Contracting is not necessarily conscious. Consciously withdrawing is fine if it's a noxious stimulus or something. And similarly, when are you screaming out when it's too much? Do you have any awareness of when it's a little bit too much and you need to screen it out? So I think we're ready for the next breakout, and this one should be for, how long is this one really? 10 minutes?
Yes, 10 minutes.
Okay. And I don't have the data in front of me. How many people per room?
3.
Yep, good. They come rushing back in.
Breakout is interrupt us.
Breakout is interrupt us.
It's what I'm getting better at now doing, because it was being HSP. It had a little startling effect in the past when I'd be engaging and all of a sudden it's like, we're gone. You know, we're thrown back into the plenary. So I'm getting better at actually watching the seconds count down So it's less abrupt.
Okay, so we got a few minutes to share a little bit. What did you notice? What did you learn about this exercise? What were you strong at? Were you weak at?
Well, I was more self-aware because it kind of helped me see like different people's pace of communicating. So mine is more, since I have a lot of excitement, it's more like lowering that depending on the person I'm speaking to. And I'm already doing that with my body language and walking slower. So this has been really helpful for me.
Great. Other comments? How good are we at not opening up to certain people?
I had an interesting insight that I don't tend to screen out when it's too much because I grew up with an intense person, and so the normal was like you didn't have an option to screen, and so that was fascinating. Like, oh, you can do that. So I do the first question, deciding what you open up to. I tend to do that more in terms of like who I spend time with and the quantity of time I spend with them. If I have somebody who I'm going to be with who's sort of a fire hose intensity person, I'll organize that and I'll plan it and make sure I've had food and fuel and all that. But the notion of like screening something out when it's too much is like, wow, that's super exciting and radical.
Yeah, and I like the idea that you're organizing for certain people. You're kind of setting an intention that's realistic rather than just be totally exposed. Other observations?
Yeah, similar to Liz, I'm better at deciding to close myself off to like intense television or movies or like busy streets, things like that. But with people, it's more of a challenge and something I'm still working on.
That's something I didn't think of. I don't use the freeway all the time if I don't have to. It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated, Tom, when you stated that, you know, your reaction can be is within 3 seconds. And I'm going to keep that in mind so that as I feel what's happening inside, you know, I don't have to respond. I can, you know, I can just realize that just that quick reaction of 3 seconds says maybe you need to just kind of back away a little.
Yeah. That's where we still have a choice.
Yes.
Till what Larry likes to say, limbic hijacking, when you're gone.
Right. Yeah.
I think one of the things that me and Shiva and Liz found out is that we kind of determined there's a difference between the speed somebody's delivering it at and the force they're delivering the message at. And that makes a big difference on how much energy they're draining from you. So they could be speaking really fast, but it could be totally no force. You understand it, you get it, but they could be speaking relatively slow or barely saying anything. But if it's a lot of force, it's very draining. It seems very draining.
Yeah, somebody in the chat used the metaphor of fire hose. They're coming at you with. Okay.
I notice my reaction matters too. That like if I go to a movie and it's another movie where they're raping and disemboweling women and that's entertainment, I'll feel really angry and I'll say something really out loud in the movie. I'll say, you know, I'll stand up in my seat and go, this is not entertainment. And then I'll walk out or something. Then I won't be affected at all. But if I sit there, I'll be very affected. So anger makes it go away.
Well, I'd love to go to a movie with you, Jesse.
Oh, I get so pissed off. And I'm Sicilian, so it's not so hard.
There's a couple comments also in the chat, which I think are cool. Karen mentioned she's learned the hard way to recognize and screen out people with borderline type behavior. So that's kind of along that screening. And then Kathy mentioned, I wonder how much of my love of reading has to do with the idea that when I'm reading, I might be recovering from intensity or taking time to process intensity.
Mm.
And then Emily said, screening out is new to me. How does one do that? So are you going to address that, Tom?
I'll
How does
jump in
one
if I may.
screen out?
Yeah, can I say something? Something that the awareness that occurred for me, Tom, during this, looking at this is when I have heavy energy or whatever coming at me, I try to look at, assuming I'm not getting overly triggered, my amygdala is not going haywire. I try to look at it as, because heavy energy coming at me, I can feel it in my own body, even though it's not mine. So what I look at is, okay, is this my stuff that I'm feeling or is it their stuff? Because it affects, getting clear on that affects how I presence myself to them. I can be with them if I recognize it's their stuff, but I'm feeling it, but it's their stuff. So I can be with them and have more compassion. But if I recognize it's my stuff, in other words, I've been triggered, what I'm feeling is my stuff, it's a lot harder for me to be present with them and feel compassion with them, because then I'm caught up in my own, what's going on over here.
That's a really good observation. Is what Larry's suggesting there is he's showing up as either first or second person, or can he pull back to third person and interact? So some of you from reading the integral books may be aware of that. And then the other idea of screening, I like to use it as a visual metaphor. I had a client I worked with. She had to go to court in a very stressful situation. And I had her literally develop a screen. She was going to stay behind the image of a screen when she entered the courtroom. And it worked out beautifully because she goes, Dr. Habib, not only did I develop a screen, I embroidered it red because I knew he was so toxic. And I stayed behind the screen. He popped off. The judge started yelling at him to shut up or he was going to throw him out of the courtroom. And I walked out of there without any energy being expended. And I loved it. And she said I could use that embroidery method. But it seems to be when we set that intention of a screen, then we're not as exposed. Most people walk around, they put their emotional keyboard out there, and they invite everybody they encounter to play a tune. That's not a very good strategy, especially the deeper you get into HSP. So we're just beginning to language this stuff so we can show up and not look battle fatigued, so to speak. Okay, one more final comment. We got to get back in.
Tom, what do you mean by the screen thing that this lady used? I don't understand.
You know, it's just the idea of you visualize the screen.
Oh, okay.
And it's just a translucent or transparent screen that's going to filter out some of the more noxious stuff coming at you. So whatever works for you. Like if I walk into Italian restaurants, I don't use a screen, but I need to quiet everything down because they yell all the time. As much as I love the food, they drive me nuts. And if I don't go in there, then it's just going to wear me out and interfere with me enjoying things. So I'm kind of aware of what I'm walking into. That's my centering. So I'm not overreacting because auditory can really spike me. If Christine drops something in the sink, I mean, I'm like up on the ledge and then I have to calm down real quick. So I have a huge startle response.
Let me add a quick piece that fits in here, Tom. If I'm hearing, a loud noise, for example, usually it's loud noise, not bright lights or anything, but the technique I learned actually back in like I told in my breakout group in the late 70s, teaching some self-hypnosis, is when I was meditating or trying to do self-hypnosis, if there was loud sounds, I would use a phrase, the sounds help me relax. The sounds, I didn't call it noise, which it was. I called it sounds because it had less edge to it, less kind of negative connotation. The sounds help me relax. Now, in fact, the sounds didn't help me relax, but by saying that, it took that nasty edge off of it. so I can more easily be with the noise, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a great skill level of a level of acceptance. And anyone have any relationship to this one, depending upon what subscale you were high in? Like the propensity to overwhelm. Well, that's the one we're talking about, right? That shows up real here if you have a high score there. Any observation there?
I have like a unrelated comment on the same thing. When you say strong sensory input, what does that mean?
Strong centering input.
Sensory input, sensory.
Strong sensory input, you know, can be across any one of the modalities. That if you're highly sensitive, then you're going to feel sensory information in all its nuances and all of its fire hose quality, which can be very disruptive. If you're low on HSP, it's not going to be that much of an issue. You know, you're still going to want to pay attention to how you show up. And even low HSPs need to upregulate, turn up the sensitivity to fully feel the resonance and the availability of coherence. So that's what I mean by sensory input. Okay, can we move on? Because I want to show you a little bit more.
Quick note, y'all, at the end, we'll have more time for conversations. So I know some of you still had questions, but we will definitely have more time at the end because it's really rich. We could go on. Thanks,
Okay.
Tom.
So all of this is gearing to showing up and the ability to enter we space. Because if you're doing what, you know, a lot of the language we talk about in integral, cleaning up, waking up, growing up, then you can show up. But when we show up collectively, we have to be able to feel the resonance. And the resonance is communal energy that can be easily derailed if you don't stay what we've been calling horizontal in your input, meaning you can't make just an intellectual comment, you have to hold the resonance. So resonance in time tends to be brief. We go in resonance, and perhaps today you felt it. You can feel the communal resonance building in different moments. And as long as somebody doesn't derail it, it shows up. And I was thinking about it. Some people are unaware when resonance is here, whereas some people contract during that moment of resonance, almost as if they feel overexposed, and then their contribution is going to derail it. But if you're familiar with it, if you're not overreacting to the exposure, the physiology going off, then you're going to recognize somebody capable of coherence. Coherence is a little bit different in that you can just enter it without an external stimuli that I'm going to talk about in a moment. And the time there is a lot longer because you got two people capable of contributing to the energy of that space in that moment. So it's cohering. The joint energy is cohering. We space, which is the goal, especially in a large group, is sustained energy, and whoever's in that group together really matters. That do they recognize the subtle resonance and coherence, and can they keep it going? So that's what we're working towards. So in resonance, remember I alluded to there's external resonance and internal resonance. I don't know what these people are listening to right now, but they're resonating with whatever's going on. I think it's probably music event, and they're obviously loving it. Now, could they turn to each other and maintain that intensity? For the most part, no. Somebody would make a comment that would lower the temperature in the moment. So, but it is an external source of resonance. It's a collective I, Larry likes to call this, not a we yet. They're having the same experience, but because they're not looking at each other, it is even approaching we. Now in this one, these pitches have internal and external resonance. On the upper left, these two women are developing their own resonance. It's internal. On the lower right, here's my friend Hillary from Germany with Jeremy, and they're dancing. Can you feel the energy? And for them, it's internal resonance. Can you see my cursor? But look at this gentleman right here watching them. It's external resonance. And then above Hillary's head, I believe this is Carl, he's having external resonance watching these two dance. So it's important to look for it. One of the pathways we become familiar with this is using external resonance like nature, music, somebody that has good presence can open space. And then we're conscious of, in that moment, not changing the ambiance that's beginning to open up. But you can see why we need to language this, because if we're not aware of these subtle processes, then you're going to say something intellectual that's going to derail it. So let's take one more step back to here. So in this exercise, remember in centering, what we're doing, we're aware of what's going on within ourselves, and we're aware of what's happening outside. And I'm deciding how and what I'm going to react to. In this instance, I want you aware of when you need to upregulate. Like when I'm with people that can really open space, I love upregulating, meaning I'm bringing more online so I can feel the nuances of everything they're saying and their body language. And when I'm with that person, I'm aware that both of us are having an experience that our language can't keep pace with what's unfolding in the moment. It's flowing really quick. It's cohering. And we're going in that space and we can't keep up with what's unfolding. Isn't that a wonderful feeling? That's why we go to these conferences. I love being with those people. Now, Larry made reference to this, down regulating. This is when something gets exposed or they're coming at you at a different way. Can you quickly shift? Are you aware of what you can do? One of the metaphors I use on this, if you ever look at those satellites, that look deep, astronomical satellites that look deeply into the cosmos, and they're big, huge mirrors. Underneath those mirrors are little actuators that adjust to the light going through the atmosphere so the image is more distinct and crisp. Can you picture that? So it adjusts the mirror at 1,000 little different points so the image gets cleaned up depending upon the light going through the atmosphere and the distortion. That's what we want to be able to do when we're holding presence. Can we adjust in all 4 quadrants while maintaining connection? HSPs can do it, providing they can stay on top of it. And they're aware of everything that's going on in that moment. So that's going to be the exercise you're going to do at this point, is I want you to go in there and talk about upregulating and downregulating. How do you do it? When do you screw it up? When do you totally lose it? And how exactly do you do it? Okay? Any quick questions before we go in? Yep, Eloy's got the Adara in the chat. So Eloy, this is going to be 3 per room, I believe?
Yes.
Okay.
10 minutes again.
Okay, we're ready. See you back in 10 minutes. Is everybody back? It looks like. Okay.
I think so.
So, any comments on upregulating or downregulating? Did you learn anything from other people and hearing them?
Yes, a big thing I learned is that downregulating's got a lot to do with sovereignty.
Sovereignty. Say a little more.
Yeah. The more that you feel empowered, the easier it is to downregulate. And yep, it has to do it. Yeah, it was amazing. And if you feel trapped, it's harder to downregulate.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Marge.
Unmute yourself, Marge, if you want to talk.
I learned something. I talked about my own experience, and then I think his name was Stephen. I didn't know him, but he talked about going to a community gathering where he was there, and suddenly I realized, and I'd never ever thought of this, that the techniques, or they weren't techniques, but they were the awareness of energy and the invocation of a higher energy that I used to use on Sunday mornings. Was when the mayor invited me to come and do an invocation for the city council meeting, I invoked that same kind of energy, changed the words a little bit, but did it, and invoked the same kind of giving kind of energy with words like go forth and live it, although I would translate it into political science language, which I also knew from. Thank you. I really learned a whole new level of awareness from just this one breakout. Thank you.
That is a really good observation. Is, you're entering a big group and you want to make an impact. To upregulate and carry the energy that needs to be said at that moment, to be aware of it. But simultaneously, that takes quiet and inside to see what needs to be said to the group at that moment, and to really articulate what is the experience that the group wants to emerge as a collective. We are so hungry for the collective experience. And it's because of a lack of awareness and leadership, we just stumble in chaos trying to get there. But part of the way we get a choice is what you're saying, Marge, is languaging this so that we understand at each turn where we are and what are our options available. Other people? Up and down regulating?
Oh, I wanted to follow up on Marge, because she's been she's a Unity minister for her career, and we're talking about largely about the quadrants. And she was saying when I asked her how she would upregulate before getting on the platform before a room full of people, and she would invoke spirit, which is like bringing something from some different level outside the plane of the quadrant that we're talking about. And then also downregulate after being on the platform in the same way, that there's just more dimensions than what we're talking, the 4 quadrants we're talking about.
Yeah.
I'd like to add, Larry brought up a point when we were talking about upregulating, because that was the most mystifying one. And basically what he was describing is he becomes extremely receptive to another person. His interest in another person and his ability to affirm what they're saying, what they're bringing up, opens up the field. Suddenly they feel safe, they feel someone is interested, and it soon becomes an exchange. And that just really not only opens it up, but makes you sort of feel lighter and lean into, you know. I thought that was really cool.
Christine?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I think in our group, we recognized a distinction between an inner experience versus an outer experience of what up and down regulating might mean, so that it can look to people like you're upregulating, but your own internal experience can be that you're doing that upper right quadrant, you know, the outward behavior, but you're doing it in a way that really helps yourself feel like, okay, I'm okay, I can join this group, I'm good. And conversely, I mean, you can look like you are down regulating and being quiet and serene and a little bit apart, but it can also internally feel a little bit different. So the up and down regulating seems to have both, you know, an outward manifestation and an inward manifestation that may not always be the same.
Very cool. Eloy?
Yeah, we had an interesting conversation in our group, and we kind of got into the difference between introverts and extroverts and how up-regulating, down-regulating is different for those. And the other interesting part is that the 3 of us in the group were all, even though we're one way, we identify one way, we're all working on being, finding that other part of ourselves and working that into our life practice.
Yeah. Any final comments before we move on?
I have a question of, I have a couple of my own ways, but how do other people up and down regulate? Like, what is the practice that you're doing? Because we haven't covered, or is that part of the next section?
No, that's a good question. I mean, Larry already said via Lorraine, I think, that he opens up a level of sensitivity of how he's hearing. Anyone else have anything else?
Yeah, I think, you know, when you're making love, you're regulating. So you're sensing what's going on in your partner. And that's pretty much what, you know, you're doing when you're upregulating any old place. It's pretty much the same as what you're doing when you're having sex.
Oh, I love that topic, Jesse. Someday in the future, I'm going to talk about that. Although Christine said, I got to be careful what I share.
Let me give a little distinction in terms of the way why I do the upregulating the way I do in terms of drawing out other people. I learned a long time ago to kind of show up in a space with other people and I'm kind of bubbling and full of energy and I'm upregulated. It doesn't come across well. And I noticed the flip side, when people kind of show up in a circle, I'm with some people and you know, little Miss Bubbly shows up, it's like, you know, help us to get with you instead of just being all bubbly, whatever. And it's not necessarily for me, it's not necessarily contagious.
Oh, yeah. So
I found there's a huge utility in trying to get the other person into that space naturally, in a natural kind of way by engaging them. Then there's more space for the juiciness to show up mutually.
Thing that came up for me, Tom, is the having the attitude of acceptance versus the attitude of resistance.
Yeah.
If I'm resisting, it's hard for me to. I would say I down-regulate because I shut down, and if I'm accepting, then I can open up to the experience and all the all the things that come with it.
Right. Exactly. But you mentioned acceptance, Eloy. What Larry had said, some people aren't going to respond if you're too upregulated. And what I related to is when I go to a hospital staff meeting with a lot of physicians, oh my God, you know, the energy feels so negative and closed off. And I match that energy. And, you know, I don't say too much and I hold my space. So now they're comfortable with me, especially since they know I'm a shrink and I'm the physician well-being chair. I'm already kind of like persona non grata because I'm weird because I'm a shrink. And plus I'm the chair of the well-being committee, which that's where they go when they get in trouble. So I go in there real quiet and only making intellectual comments. So I'm down regulating. When I do presentations to them, I start in the orange area. I'll show them a research study. I'll show off my skills in statistical analysis. It is down regulating before I open up that space because I can feel the group accept me then. Oh yeah, he's one of us. He isn't too touchy-feely. I'm not going to set off homophobia or something. So I thought Larry's point was really good. If you got to match the prevailing group, then look for the opening, you know, where they want to evolve.
I have a quick question. Do you find sometimes that people can bring a room down? Because I've seen like people walk into like a hospital, especially a hospital setting in an OR or somewhere where everyone's in kind of a happier mood, but one person walks in and it all goes the other direction. It all goes in the other direction.
Depends on how much power they have in terms of how I look at it, that one person. If they're a high status person, that'll affect the room, yeah, but if they're less status or less impact, generally speaking.
I actually heard it by a coach one time who said it's the strongest tuning fork in the room. So it's not necessarily their status, like professionally or whatever, but it may just be that that thing we were talking about with force. It may be that the force of whatever emotional state they're vibrating at it's taking up more space, if you will. It's more, right. It's more fire hosing the room than someone else. So it's like the loudest tuning fork.
Good clarification.
Okay, so we got to move on a little bit. Do you want to go quick, Kerry?
I was just thinking, thanks, about the current situation here in America where hospital staff are so stressed, and so their reservoir for being able to hold their centers is off balance right now. So maybe much more affected than they would be otherwise.
Yeah, no doubt, current circumstances. Okay, let me show you this. This is going to couples. And those of you familiar with my model, this is a couple at stage 4 versus stage 5. And I want you to notice the things that are highlighted in pink and turquoise. In stage 4, there's some ability to look at self while your partner observes. Whereas in 5, it is total transparency in the moment. They're not reacting. Those of you familiar with my work have heard me say, in intimacy, that's the most difficult place to fully show up. I'm amazed how people want more, but they want the earliest stage of the relationship, stage 1, safety and attraction, where they weren't really in love with the person, they were in love with their projective ideal. The good news is, if you can show up, there's a lot more to be done. So look at the next one, in 4, tendency for exposure or shame. And this is good. I mean, if you get the 4, you're doing incredibly well. Whereas in 5, quick adjustments to exposure. There's that satellite with the actuators. They're going, bring it on. This is amazing what's unfolding. And the intimate couple, they can really become the cosmic Taurus because of the number of levels they're connected on, providing they can handle the amperage. Okay, did I miss one? I want to scroll down just a little bit. Well, let me scroll down. All right. In stage 4, strong ability to self-soothe. Anyone capable of getting to stage 5 is set as an intention and a practice. They don't need to self-soothe. They're so familiar with this territory, no matter what you do, they're taking care of themselves in that moment. They're accepting what comes across at that time. So I just wanted to connect it to intimacy, because this part of the reasons I got into HSP is I realized the interface it had with intimacy. So we're ready for the next one we're going to do, which is you're going to put all the skills together today, and you're going to do the whole thing. I'm going to use an external source of resonance. And unlike last year at IEC 2020, where I absolutely clobbered you with the video, this year I think I'm only going to whack you with it. So it is fairly intense, but it's the least intense one I could find. So what I want you to do, you're going to be in the video for about 4.5 minutes to get the full effect of it. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms of, I believe, Eloy, it's going to be 4 for 12 minutes each. Is that correct? Eloy, are you still with us? Earth to Eloy.
He's on mute.
Eloy, could you unmute?
Yeah, I was getting the video ready, so.
Okay. So I believe we have 4 in the room for 12 minutes.
Yes. No, yes.
So notice everything that happens, the condition you arrive in the breakout room, you know, what's going off. So the things you're looking at, can you do to yourself or other people? What are you opening up to? Are you consciously withdrawing to get center? Are you screening out? Are you staying center? Are you recognize coherence and resonance as it develops? It is coming internally between you and another person, or are you reacting to the video? And are you successfully, I suspect you're going to down regulate initially and then up regulate depending what people are saying. Okay, are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, you went exile us the cosmos. Oh, I'm sorry, you're going to play the video first, right?
Right. And then the reminder is that you go to the breakout room silently after the video.
Hi, my lovely.
Hi.
Welcome to America's Got Talent. How are you?
A little bit nervous.
That's okay to be nervous. That's totally understandable. What's your name?
Courtney.
And how old are you?
13.
13. What's your favorite subject in school?
Music.
What kind of music?
I don't know.
You're very sweet. And I'm guessing you're going to be singing for us?
Yeah.
Listen, don't be nervous. I know this is a big stage and there's lots of people here, but you're here for a reason, so go for it and good luck.
Thank you.
Hey, you there, here I am, I'm the girl
You like this shy little thing when you first came out, and then you sing and you're like a lion. I mean, genuinely incredible. Howie, what did you think?
Oh my gosh. You are not from this era. You're from a whole different era.
Yes.
And I'm a huge Janis Joplin fan. And there's a story, if you ever watch the documentary, Clive Davis, he goes to the Monterey Pop Festival and he sees this young girl that nobody has ever seen before, that nobody knows. It was the first time Janis Joplin got signed. And that changed her life. Do you know that story?
Yeah.
I'm not Clive Davis, I'm Howie Mandel, and I can't sign you to a record deal. The only thing I can do for you, young lady, is give you...
Liz, are you back in the room?
I am.
Oh, there you are. So we're running out of time. It's 6 o'clock. I'd like people to comment on their experience of putting it all together, how well you did, what happened. But maybe we can switch into the social hour, Liz. Can you describe what we're going to do?
Sure. So first of all, thank you all for being here. This was fantastic. Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. This was like really rich conversation. I think everybody got a lot out of this. Yes, I'm seeing a lot of clapping hands. This will be recorded. We'll be posting the link, I believe, probably like we did last time on the meetup meeting itself down in the comments. So we'll also probably send out a note to look for it there. Next month, we have the recap from the Integral European Conference, June 12th, Saturday, June 12th. And if you attend, please get in touch with someone from the leadership team. If you would like to present a little 5-minute summary of what was impactful, that's what we're hoping for, to have a handful of people do recaps from the conference. So that's for next month. July, we have to go to sandiegointegral.org to get all the info. Also, if you'd like to donate towards the organization and doing the Zoom fees and the meetup fees and all that, that would be great. There's a button for that on sandiegointegral.org. And I think that's everything. July, we have 2 meetups. Anyway, lots of exciting things happen. Thank you so much to all the new people for coming. Thank you to all our regulars. It's wonderful to see you. And yeah, so we'll just move into our social part and continue the conversation. Tom.
Yeah, let's talk real quick about that new July one. It'll be July 24th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And our guest is going to be Miles Kessler, an Aikido master.
Yes, sure. So 11 a.m. we're doing that so that some more folks from other parts of the world can join us. We do have people dialing in right now from Australia and all kinds of far-flung places. It's wonderful. So the presentation by Miles Kessler on July 24th, it's 11 a.m. It's the evolution of response. It's a developmental approach towards greater awareness, connection, and creativity in conflict. So actually it will potentially build kind of on what we were doing today in terms of, I'm guessing, in terms of awareness and exposure and all that. So it should be really great.
So that said.
And then July 9th for Karen Voorhees.
July 10th, yes, 4 p.m. Yes, it isn't up online yet. We haven't got all the details yet, but Karen is going to do a presentation. And we're very excited because Karen has been a regular with us and has always had some amazing things to contribute. What is the topic? Do we have the topic on that? The title?
Haven't agreed on a title yet, but it's looking at the Renaissance. This is I need to just what Tom's specific take is, but the Renaissance from an integral point of view. How did we get catapulted into modernity? So we'll be refining that.
Thanks, Karen. That's great. I'm very excited.
I'll add that Karen is quite qualified to give that presentation.
Thank you, Larry.
Very excited. Awesome. All right. So Tom.
So we're going to just segue into the social hour now. But why don't we start with, what was your experience pulling it all together? Was the video a little bit too powerful? How did you react to it? Were you able to show up or did you contract? So jump in. What did you do?
We sat in silence for like, I don't know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes in our group. It was just settling. It felt like to me kind of, yeah. And my experience was watching the dance between staying kind of open, receptive, and sort of wanting to de-escalate a little bit the intensity of the experience. So, but yeah, our group was quiet for quite a while before we talked about it.
Right. And I feel like in the ideal world, we would have a choice right now that we would all be like, how many of us, or the 37 of us, that we could either go through the door where the rock music is playing and we could all dance like crazy because we've been together sitting down for 2 hours, or we could stay in the room and chat and kind of go back and forth between those two doors. So I'm open to that. To rocking out.
Yeah, I contracted. I was very concerned for that young girl. I was concerned during it and concerned for what life is going to do to her after that.
Really? Why?
She's so vulnerable. And when her face crumpled, you know, afterwards, and the audience is standing and cheering, and this has been dynamic and wonderful. But the one comment the guy said leading up, he said, well, but I can't offer you a contract. Her face crumpled. And then he made, but I'll do this. And then she was in her ecstatic. I thought, she is so vulnerable. I hope she has people who are going to protect her from what's going to come at her with a talent like that.
Wow.
I had the same reaction. It was a contraction just because of the harshness. And I remember Janis Joplin, but she's not Janis Joplin. She's imitating Janis Joplin. And, you know, she hasn't formed her own identity yet. And this can be really confusing, but, you know, so for me, there was a contraction. And I think our whole group had somewhat different reactions. And when we tried to move the conversation to resonance, you know, that we were not resonating in terms of our reactions, there was a certain resonance in the discussion of our different reactions, because we were opening up to each other and sort of trying to get a sense of how the other persons were feeling about it. And there was some resonance in that, which was kind of interesting.
That's some good points there. What I had was a little bit different because I was looking at my own life experience comparison, but the point about her vulnerability is actually a pretty powerful point. I had a shyness that I worked through, but I did it incrementally by taking classes on dancing, ballroom dancing, and classes like speech debate and improvisational theater. So I kind of worked through it gently, and maybe later on sales and sales jobs. So it was a process for me. And when you're right, that sudden transition, I hadn't thought about that because I was applauding her capacity to use music to change her state. But that suddenness of that career change, you're right. I hadn't actually thought about that. So that's a good point.
So we're at the more informal part here. So if you want to, you can just unmute and talk whenever you're ready. So we're not raising hands or anything.
As I say, my nervous system fell for that hook, line, and sinker. I was so pulled into the performance that I was a mess. And so I was ready to just cry and I could feel deeper aspects resonating with it. I thought it was just incredible to see that performance, but then to have to down regulate before I came back into relationship was very interesting.
But then we had Derek was in the same breakout room I thought the four of us developed a beautiful resonance afterwards during our time together.
Cool.
Yeah, somehow it did seem easier in a way to have resonance, and even in our group, we're in the silence to allow for resonance, because that video sort of invites you to feel along with it, you know. So it is sort of, as far as you were talking about an external, I don't remember the word exactly, external stimulus. Yeah, it did seem effective.
I kind of want to know why Derek had to downregulate. Why didn't you just take it into the room?
You know, something that was coming up for me was just deeper around the human as a container for deeper potential that wants to actuate into this existence through each one of us. And there was a part of me deeper down that was just getting triggered. That was it was a very interesting experience. So, you know, and something that I had shared with the group is another integral group I'm involved with. Something that's come up is, you know, what if you could create a container for people to maximize their potential in this existence? And that got triggered and came up with her performance. And it was very heartfelt for me, and just some very core things were coming forward. And I didn't know what to do with it, to be quite honest. So
Then Derek ended up expressing that during our breakout group, and that was when I just really opened. You know, I'd been kind of closed down during the performance, but it led to some beautiful exchanges.
I was in the same group, and I think for me there was a balance in that resonance, right? Some of us were maybe more upregulated, some of us are downregulated possibly. But when we shared our perspectives, I felt like a balance in there. And that's what connected me. And we too started off with some silence, and maybe it was 30 seconds and I heard a bird chirping, and I almost just wanted to sit in silence for the entire time, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm
thinking about Elliot's question about why didn't we continue that. It's like, I think because several of us are taking it differently, getting in the group together, we can feel that you know, this was just behind a video from several years ago, and that's not real for us here. And you can see from the expressions of the people in the room that they're not really with us. It's not time we're going to say, okay, let's find that video and play it again so we can hear that music again. That was like, we can tell that's not what's happening. It wouldn't be authentic because it's not here. But we had the room closed before I could quite finish a thought that, but it's still there. And that seems like in the ancient world, it was thought to be a virtue to be taken over by the crowd, to go into the amphitheater, like the Colosseum, where the tigers were going to kill a couple people and all the animals were going to come out and kill people here and there, or the gladiators were going to fight each other, and just get caught up in that violence and the spectacle and just get caught up with what everybody was doing. And it was, they weren't, it seemed like, I remember my classics teacher, I'm not a classics person at all, but saying that that was the virtue, that it wasn't seen as, that wasn't anything, a reflection on yourself. It was the whole crowd was being taken over by that, and to be able to be taken over by what was there was what the culture did. It was looked like, it's like everybody does it, and if you can be there and do that too, that's great. It's being taken over by God, being taken over by another force, and it's like, wow, you can do that, like great. It's kind of the opposite, like everybody could upregulate and stay there and be with everybody else in that energy. Of course, that was violent and people died.
Yeah, today we only use
It's the same thing in sports game at the moment. People do the same thing at the moment if you attend a rugby game, a football game. So it's the same.
Right.
Boxing, wrestling match. I don't know.
Right. Or a U2 concert. Right. Right.
Although the concert seems more generative than destructive, and that's what's interesting. I'd never heard it be held as a virtue, that getting into sort of the mob feeling or mob mentality in the classical times. I'd never heard that.
It's sort of like being taken over by love, if you're in love. Like,
no, I get what I get.
Oh, I know. Like it's like being taken over by the crowd, being taken over by love, being taken over by war, being like, if you go to a religious site, to be taken over by spirit. I think that's partly why they had multiple gods, because of the multiple types of feelings. They were like, no, but they were sure there are, that those were real things to be taken over by.
Yeah, the gods were the psychology of the day. You know, you get taken over by Venus, you get taken over by Aries, you get taken over by Pan. It's a panic. I mean, I think Jung said the gods of the former days are the neuroses of today. Well, he was in a negative mood, but they are the psychology, you know, as well as forces of nature. They were an externalization, and people were more susceptible to being swept away by it 2,000 years ago. Yeah, you can.
Speaking as an immigrant to America, I found, I mean, I don't like that program because I think there's a lot of cruelty in it, in the way that and I don't watch it except when somebody presents me with something like this. But I've seen the presenters be really cruel and unnecessarily unkind to some of the participants, the competitors. So I don't like that. But I also felt incredibly manipulated. I mean, when she initially spoke and was being asked questions, it was like, oh my gosh, what are they going to do to her today? And then when she just got on the stage and shifted her mind and body, I mean, I was just covered in goosebumps and really enjoyed it for a while. And then I thought, and when it came to the end, I really think, oh yeah, this is the American way. You know, you've got to punch you in the face, and then they're going to try and sell you something. And I felt really manipulated. And but I hear you too, Kathleen, when you're talking about being taken over by God. It's such a different experience. Here, I just felt, I mean, her performance aside, I felt, you know, the whole way the show is presented is to just, grab you by the whatever and take you for a ride and emotionally batter you about.
Right. I don't watch this show either. I was talking in general, like what Tom chose to show us and just exposed to the transition.
I find it interesting that there are these shows that have these big, emotionally sweeping experiences, almost like we're using that as a substitute for our fear around doing that in real life. Like there's, like Tom was saying, we have this hunger for this, and I think that's really true. And yet we don't go do it one-on-one and tell our people how much we love them, or tell them how uncomfortable or off or difficult something is, face to face. We go and have these substitute emotional experiences of resonance with the TV, and the fact that they heighten them to that degree to sort of get people to feel them is interesting cultural statement. It's true.
Yeah, I wished I could have just seen only her performance, independent of the chopped up editing. And I really see what you're saying, Carrie, and that would be a reason why, you could see that they were manipulating. Initially, they were doing the down regulating. Oh, you'll be okay. Don't be too afraid. Don't be shy. You'll be all right. And then they kept showing other people that was supposed to upregulate you. Okay, now it's time to get swept away in this. And then, it was like back and forth in there. So I didn't want to get so caught up in the production of the video, but we did this at Tom's place. I don't know how long ago that was, and I know that I was in Eli's group, and I said I wanted to just go wild with the video, and he said, well, then why don't you? And so I did, and I was just all over the place, and and that's what I only could have done if I wasn't continuously chopped into, okay, now we all got to look at this guy's reaction. Now we all got to look at him pushing that button after kind of leading her to think that she didn't do well. And, like the manipulation part of it, I really see that, Carrie.
I was surprised that it was interpreted as like, when y'all saw that and he was saying, well, I can't do this. Because what I heard straight out from him from the get-go is, I want to be able to do this. And since I can't, like, you knew something was coming, he was going to do something else, and the golden button is there. So I didn't hear that as a putting down. I mean, when I saw her face sort of crumpling, she knew what was coming. Like, I can't do this, but, like, that's what I want to do. So, like, obviously his intention was favorable, like really big favorable.
I agree.
That was how I heard it.
That's how I heard it too. Yeah, that's how I heard it as well.
So one of the things we touched on in my group was, and I haven't done much work on this yet, but why do we feel joy and sadness together in those videos? And what we talked about in our group was that, the joy is pretty obvious. To see her succeed is something that was a dream of hers. But the sadness seems to reveal in all of us how much time we struggle in doubt, trying to realize our potential and our possibilities. And Anna and our group had said that, we mustn't forget, when she walked on stage, you could feel the panel full of doubt of whether she was even going to be able to perform. But then we see this amazing potential she has. And Anna made the point that, what shadow covers our own potential. But this idea of joy and doubt is in our own transformation. We spend so much time doubting what's possible. So I think that's what taps the sadness, is to know we get out of purgatory, that it isn't a place we're going to forever be relegated to. I'm curious what other people think. Why joy and sadness in these types of videos?
I have a theory. I start to rename sadness to relinquishment, because it's not just purely sadness, it's the letting go of something, often a belief or a people will often have sadness for a thing that they wanted that they realize is impossible. So I talk about the little kid in the ice cream. The kid drops the ice cream on the ground. Why are they crying? They're crying because they wanted the ice cream and now it's impossible because it's on the ground. And so it's they wrap themselves up in terms of ego, in terms of attachment to the idea of having the ice cream. And then now that it's gone, a healthy thing to do is to release that through sadness, to relinquish the desire for the ice cream. In the same way, we sort of, my hunch is, well, here's my take. As we watch her, we get accustomed to some level of this is how we expect her to perform. And then when she absolutely changes that, we have to relinquish the low bar that we had set and the assumption that this is how it was. And that's where I think sadness comes in. And I'm not sure, maybe there's a role for sadness there, but in relinquishing that low bar and realizing that it's much higher, it's a joy mixed with sadness.
Yeah, I guess following up on what you both said before, yeah, one of the elements that I see in this through the girl's experience and her vulnerability allows for that, for us to feel the experience through her of something that we always felt possible, but never felt it in the body. But there's like a meta something part of us that knows that where I belong body-wise, like in this state of recognition of who I fully am, of my full potential. And we get to see it in her. So it's like this, I also recognize this part of like a sort of grief where you're pulled apart from the version that you lived in your entire life. And at the same time, that reality that's always been also there in contrast, making a contrast. And that's what we sometimes feel like as a reminder not to stop here, like there's something more. And usually when we're not able to see that, we experience the pain or the smaller version.
Yeah, Patricia, and it makes me wonder around this paradox of why isn't it possible, or at least how I grew up in it, the society I grew up, not to hold both at the same time? So why does it have to be sadness or the joy? Why can't it be both and? And this made me inquire into my autopilot modus. So what is my autopilot modus? And just what you said as well, Patricia, while watching the video, the embodiment of the aliveness and spirit coming through me, and I am it. And when I'm it is that pure aliveness and the awakening and all of that, and just being in that void space of not being present with myself, because I'm almost like an overwhelm of my nervous system, and then having that autopilot modus where I'm actually shutting off, and then being in that void. It's almost like allowing to be in that void with myself and what is present to synthesize. So what is it that needs to be synthesized in that space for me? That's an inquiry, and I don't have an answer to that. It always works through me.
I love your question, Tom. And what came for me is that it's a very deep level of knowing. It's almost like one of the passages in Khalil Gibran's book, The Prophet, of joy and sorrow being two sides of the same coin. And they can't be separated. And it's not something you can explain. It's not something you can even give words to.
Tom?
Yeah.
I would like to hear your reaction to the video the first time you saw it, based on the exercise you had us go through.
A lot of these videos really whacked me. I mean, I was full of emotion. I was crying during them, even though I was alone because I was looking for these videos. You know, I was trying not to contract. I was just trying to let flow through me whatever was going to happen. But, you know, all my developmental history, I was still contracting and looking to see if Christine was going to enter the room at that moment. It was strange watching myself. So I have those tendencies. And even though I've seen it, you know, probably 10 times, it's the part where she hugs her dad for the reassurance that gets me every time. And, you know, that's going to be almost kind of like an archetypal thing in all of us and why we resonate on that.
It was an interesting video from my perspective to pick. So are you saying that when you first saw that particular video of that girl, you had startle, or you had immediate openness to her, or something else?
Yeah, immediate openness to her. I was happy for her, but the openness to her didn't occur to me later on until I came up with the idea of why joy and sadness, how we all live with that latent potential and the huge doubt that comes with it. And to get affirmation that it's possible, I think that's cathartic in those moments. And that's where I felt most joined with her. But to see just a little girl do it, and it's great. It still gets me.
I had seen it 3 times. This is the 3rd time I had seen it. First time I saw it, I was like startled and like my mind's trying to like, what's happening right now? Looking at her and listening to what's coming out of her, it took a few seconds to like, oh, okay. And I thought, maybe she's possessed. Maybe she went into a possessed kind of state just to be able to channel this expression of music. And then it occurred to me that I was never a fan of Janis Joplin or that style of singing. And so I try to get that out of the way, just be with her expression and just try to feel her. That's why I watched it a second time, because so many things went on in me that I wanted to like be with it again. I'm like, what's going on here for me? And so it's fascinating for me that even though I didn't like the performance, I was drawn to understand better what was it that was disturbing for me. There was a comment earlier that concern for her well-being. To me, there's such a disjoint between how her personality shows up and how her music shows up. Such a, just this gap between the two as I see it. Not that I'm right about it, just how I see it. And being able to integrate that in a way that is okay for her. I wonder if she has to keep her music compartmentalized from her personality. And it's when she wants to perform, she goes into this state experience of that kind of musical expression.
Yeah.
Yes.
Marcia, just jump in. You don't have to raise your hand.
Oh, yeah, I would like to
Jump in.
know how it works. But I'd like to say that in my healing career, one time this man came in and when I looked at him, I said, oh my goodness, this is the happiest person I've ever seen or ever worked on. And then when I started doing the hands-on healing work that I do, I went, oh my goodness, he is got all this sadness. And so I said to him, you know, it seems like you're the happiest person that I've ever seen. And he said, I'm very happy. I said, but there's all this sadness. And he said, it's around which the joy bubbles.
Oh,
And I remember this so well. After, you know, it's been years ago.
wow.
Mhm. Yeah.
Surrounded by a joy bubble. It's a hell of a
Around
metaphor.
which the joy bubbles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of sadness in the world. I mean, you gotta admit it. There's a lot.
Yeah, I quoted Thoreau's that we all live quiet lives of desperation. to amplify a little bit, Marsha, what you had just said, there is a lot of sadness you live with. You know, when you lose people, man, but that too becomes generative. Like, why are we wasting time?
I was just thinking of a poem by William Blake. It is right, it should be so. Man was made for joy and woe. And when this we truly know, through the world we safely go.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's William Blake.
It's a side by side, I think, the joy and the grief. It's like the pandemic. You know, there's so many grief things out there this past year and a half or whatever time. And then you have the silver linings of these Zoom connections that we've made with people that we would not have otherwise been making. And other things. So it's I think it's always a side by side inside of us. And so it's just kind of, you know, just both are there. And both are active, and it's like, you know, one and the other. It's sort of like a I don't know, like a flow.
Well, I'll stick my neck out and say a couple of people here have seen me in a context where I allowed something to flow through me that didn't feel like me, that was very powerful in front of a lot of people. And my experience of this is that you better have a pretty sturdy, stable personality at the ego level, because this is powerful stuff. And whatever was coming through that little girl was so powerful. And she was so fragile. I just hope her father and other people around her are going to help hold her together through whatever she's going to be going through.
Yeah, and in answer to what Elliot had asked earlier, is I can feel the destructive potential. When I was in that space that was coming up through her, but also my own potential, I can feel how amazing that space is, but it's got such potential for destruction that makes me very uncomfortable messing around in those spaces until I have a stronger container personally.
Derek, could you clarify when you say the intense, because I experienced it more positively. So when you're speaking about the destructiveness, is that the fame aspect of that gal experiencing the fame and what could come out of that, or more like internal?
It's a space beyond the small self or beyond the relative self that all things flow forth. And the beauty and the amazingness is also there with the destructiveness. They're not separate. And so from a dualistic perspective, my relative perspective is one side feels beautiful and the other scares the shit out of me. And they're both there. And how I show up in the world as a relative self, I don't think I have control of that if I open up that space. And so, you know, I don't know what to do with that space when it shows up.
And what will control even look like? Is there like a positive, a healthy control of that kind of space? Maybe there is, like, if you look at some of the movies, you know, the horror movies especially, which I don't enjoy, I don't watch, but that might be an example of a positive control of these horrific kinds of energies. I'm not real versed in that kind of horrific space to which you're alluding to, Derek. But I know it's there. I know it's real. I know it's a part of me, and I'm pretty good at not having to go there, as it were.
I wouldn't say that I have an answer, like the answer. I don't think there's one answer, but what I found is not to focus on controlling the experience as much as a container for the experience. So it's a subtle difference, because yeah, like you said, that needs a very free space, but you can also regulate stuff around. What came to my mind as I was listening to your question, a very close dear friend, teacher of mine, he mentioned Mick Jagger. and how he can go into this full Shakti, allow everything, performance, full creation. But at the same time, he mentions how much of a businessman he is. And this is a very clear example to me how they are very separate areas. But to me, it's the ability to embody both sides of the coin at different moments so that when you're there, it will feel safe. Sorry, I hope it makes sense.
That makes me really think of the difference between accessing a state and being integrated. And I think when I'm integrated, I feel both at the same time. And then I'm often moved to tears, especially if it's something beyond my expectations. Especially a kindness beyond my expectations will move me to tears when I'm integrated. And if I'm accessing states, the whole kaleidoscope of states is available to me, and I access them. But then I come back to some other, to whatever, so that's not an integration that comes like that for me.
Well, for the people who felt sad and uncomfortable, look at Janis Joplin's life. It was very sad. And she ended up doing herself in at a very early age. So I think that just like a lot of performers, they can be one person on stage and another person in real life. Maybe she was able to channel that. I don't know what her real life is like, but she was certainly able to channel the essence of Janis Joplin.
Yeah, I like the idea of the whole idea of how you can change your whole state and personality by doing a role play and like really getting into the flow of doing that role play. It's like it's almost otherworldly to be able to do that. And I would imagine that's happened for her in that when she's singing.
I think that's how we recognize art. It is otherworldly and transcendent. I haven't had a TV for something like 30 years, so that really hit me like a ton of bricks. I was just completely sucked into her channeling of that eros. Somebody said a cult is any closely knit group that we're not part of. And I found myself toggling between like the collective I and the I it, my horror at the glitterati of it all. And just how like full on majestic her presence was and her power.
Yeah, that's what a performer is, a really great performer. I'm sure they go into a different consciousness. And maybe that's why life is sometimes difficult for performers. They become another thing on stage. All of a sudden they just blossom, then they have to go back into real life.
So Ian, I haven't heard anything from you. Ian in Paris, I believe. Are you in Paris?
No, I'm back from Paris, but I'm in Ottawa now. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just listening to the range of reactions, and I've got this scale from your assessment up, and I'm just wondering how, well, just speak personally, my own reaction. I could see my careful processing, kind of just what Lisa was saying about, seeing the manipulative part of that show. And my careful processing was not, letting myself get drawn into that. There was the propensity to overwhelm. There was just that jarring effect of the music. I was feeling the need to protect myself against that. Like a lot of these subfactors that you're measuring seem to be kind of quite active in this experience that you've created for us. So that's obviously by design, I guess, is what you were.
Sorry about the manipulation.
Yeah, and it seems that by design, it brings out this range of reactions when you put us in small groups too. So we get to experience the challenge of finding coherence when there's a range of, you know, difference. So that's, you know, I'm just enjoying that, the experience from that perspective, I guess. Thanks.
Well, I'm curious because I know Ian and Lisa both mentioned this, the aspect of the show being manipulative. Could someone explain what that, how it's manipulative? Because I'm not aware of it.
Well,
I have some thoughts on that. The program seems manipulative to me because it employs certain devices which could be considered cliche, and it uses contrasts, for instance. That was one of the key devices that I noticed. So this artist is presented in a certain manner initially, this waif-like vulnerability. And then in great contrast to that, as she goes into the music, there's this empowered performer who's really in command of the scene. So to my mind, the producers are utilizing that among other things that are more in the background to elicit certain responses from the audience and in a way draw their conclusions for them. That's what seems manipulative to me.
The question is, did it have enough authenticity that we can resonate with it? I agree. That's a good description of the production, the manipulation, but did it have enough human authenticity that we can resonate with?
When we went into the breakout rooms, I was noticing how many elements in the video there are that are supposed to push your emotionality up, right? Mm-hmm. You're seeing I assume it's the father, and then the person who's supposed to ask the father questions to bring out more emotion, all of the judges doing their own performance, the audience. So there's everything pushing up, right? So then I'm like, if they didn't use so much upward movement, would it be sellable? Would it have a rating? How much of a high level do we need as an audience, as a population, to be able to see something? Like if it were like this authentic performance for the music, for the performance in itself, would people watch?
It wasn't subtle.
I think that there are different audiences. I mean, I've heard from a number of you saying that this is not the sort of show that you choose to watch, but there's an awful lot of people out there who choose to watch that type of show, and others like it, you know, including all those like mystery shows where the unsolved murders are, and the way that they play the music and it crescendos. And then, you know, music is an incredibly powerful tool, method of taking us on a story. I mean, positively or negatively, or however we wish to interpret it, or perhaps however they wish us to interpret it, you know? So my bit.
I'm responding to Tom's question. So I do feel like the video had enough human emotion and experience that I could gauge without the aspect of the show's manipulation aspect. So would that be a good conclusion? Okay, I see Tom nodding.
I think that would depend on who was, you were asking that question one as to whether it was a good conclusion. From the point of view of the producers of the show, I think it is a very good conclusion.
I'm talking from the audience, from our us trying to understand the emotions of the person. And so even though there was the external aspects in the show that were influencing the gal, but we could still see she was excited to be there. And she was really nervous because, you know, I think she's 13. So she was in front of a ton of people on live television. And then she was able to move towards her, like, you know, the other aspect of herself to perform. And then, you know, I feel like a lot of people make joke about, oh, okay, you're failing. And then they tell you got an A, because I just felt like that was a cute joke, even though it did elicit that response in her. And maybe that is, you know, manipulation in a sense.
Well, I agree with you, Shiva. I mean, I certainly was moved on a human perspective. I mean, I just say my first reaction when she started opening her mouth and singing, I got goosebumps all over my body. It was like, I was like, whoa. So, you know, and I was right there with her. And I kind of like Janis Joplin. I'm of that age, right? It was only sort of in getting back into that third person place, really, that I went, wow, you know, they really have us. And they're swinging us around, you know, like puppets. But so there were numbers of levels at which I appreciated different things about the whole show.
Yeah, interesting. I think I was in that third person space all through. The artificiality of it, for reasons a number of people have commented on, I was already pulled back going in. And then I was really concerned for her, because those shows can be really cruel to the people. And there's, oh my God, are they going to be cruel to this poor little thing? When she started singing, I just like, she is brilliant, but I was already in that third person space. So I was just listening to her, admiring and cheering her, but I stayed in that third person space through. And I think then when her face crumpled at that one point, that's when my concern for her kicked in again.
I was hoping that Howie had not hit the golden buzzer, because I would have liked to have heard feedback from the other three judges.
I'm wanting to see if we can come back to the high sensitive person conversation. I mean, I've benefited from all the discussion here, and, you know, I'm not in charge. So that's just like a little kind of a light request. I think it's quite interesting, your topic today, Tom. For myself, I noticed that when I've told someone who's maybe medically trained, and maybe you're an exception to the rule, and maybe this was a few years ago, I said, I'm a highly sensitive person. They're like, I've never heard of that in medical school. That's not real. That doesn't exist. And someone I know said that 1 in 5 of us are highly sensitive. And some of it is these neurodiversity people, and maybe some of the ADHDs, or some of these things, or who knows if it's the autism spectrum, or a lot of these other things. And I'm very curious what you have found, you meaning really anyone here, but I'm interested in what Tom has found, because he's presenting it, but I'm also interested in what the other people, we did it in the breakout, of what seems to help to get us from when we are in that highly, you know, overwhelmed or whatever, you know, kind of down regulated place, like somatic practices, breathing, and maybe some of this, I said this, that I think it's like having a practice that we do, let's say on a regular basis, so that, you know, like, let's call it earlier in the day or something, so that when those things show up, we're in a better place to deal with it.
So your statistic on 20% of people are highly sensitive is right. That's what the data is showing. That's what I found too. But we look at it as a continuum, because those artificial cutoffs, even people that are moderately sensitive, which most of the integral people came out, it has real world implications in terms of how much intimacy or how much sharing they can do. So it's a very real condition. It's interesting when you start a study like this, different people show up at different points. I had this professor at University of California, Santa Barbara, and she's doing imaging studies of the brain of HSPs versus non-HSPs. And there's really different paths that seem to light up for the HSPs. So that would go to the construct validity of the concept. And then there's all kinds of studies on if you have a good environment, the HSP is going to enhance your development. But likewise, if you have a bad environment growing up, you're going to get whacked major time. So the beauty of the integral community is we were already doing the work from meditation, the awareness of all the quadrants, trying to clean up, wake up, and grow up so we could show up. We're already doing that work, and that's why I wanted to see if we tended to be a little more HSP than other people. What can you do? You keep growing and learning this, because it is about regulating. Is when I see couples that can really handle intimacy, I'm looking at all those things, physiologically, do they feel overexposed? I'll never forget that couple where I wanted them to just look at each other for 30 seconds on the couch, and they couldn't say a word. And I'll never forget his reaction. No, don't make me do that. Don't make me do that. And he practically levitated off the couch. It was that painful to look at his own wife for 30 seconds. And I'm like, holy crap. How can they actually have a connection when your physiology is in total panic mode? So there's a lot here. This is going to really develop out more. It's a very real thing. I know that the standard medical people, they're the last ones to learn any of these things and understand them, because they're trained mostly in pathology, not in growth.
I have one comment, Lucy. One thing, and you did mention somatic experiencing. There's something called trauma release exercises. And so that's similar to like the Body Remembers book, but there's these actual exercises. So you can look it up online, and there's certifications that you can get, or just to take a class, like a 2-day class. There's a couple of stuff online that are free. So it's kind of, helps you release the fight flight response, like the stress in your body. So if you do that in the morning, or you do it in a while, and then you're just like a lot more calmer. And I did experience that. And I think, like Tom mentioned, I did have a bumpy childhood. I don't know if I'm a HSP, but I do feel that I'm very much more like logical, yet aware of my emotions. It's really been a life-changing experience.
Tom, could you just speak to the relationship between HSP and empaths? Because I mean, prior to this, I would have called myself an empath, but I certainly score pretty high on your chart here too.
And other people have raised that, and I've thought of that myself. I think before HSP was identified and sensory processing sensitivity in general, it seems to be a much more narrow term, that people were aware that they had this ability to read things almost empathically. The languaging today is we understand, or we're beginning to understand, I should say, that when I'm with the presence of another person, I'm reading on multiple levels. It's almost silly to think it's only language at this point, because, when I'm really with somebody that's open and available, it's amazing how it flows. So I think empathy is an early attempt to begin to identify some of these things. Are you thinking in that direction, Ian?
Well, I think people use the term, empathy and being empathic in a sense of, being a good listener, but as different from being an empath, like as a noun,
Yes.
which seems to have more of a energetic component, I would describe. Yeah, I hear people's words, but I hear what's going on within them just inside me. Like it's not a language thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I train psychics and healers. So like somebody might call me up and say, Jesse, I'm really freaked out. What's going on with me? And I might tune in and go, oh, it's not you. Your son's really having a hard time right now. And the freaked out energy will kind of leave her body. So there is some kind of, Larry was talking about that. There is some kind of correlation to knowing what's happening makes it easier to let go of.
And I think there's also empaths have an intuitive capability that a lot of us don't have. They just know stuff without having to learn it and practice it and all that stuff. They're just tuned in.
They're
Yeah, but
sensitive. They're sensitive.
The problem with that, as Jung pointed out, is that you can get, if you're intuitive, empathic, you get information, energies that you don't get through the intellect or the senses, but it's not always right. You can be bullseye on target against all the odds, but then sometimes you didn't even hit the side of the barn. So you need to back it up with other ways of knowing.
Yeah, Thomas Hughes is talking about that in his latest book about the physical, mental, and emotional states and how the sensing, feeling, and thinking, the alignment of that comes into a oneness. And having awareness of what my sensing is and having an awareness where my feeling and what my feeling is and what my thinking is, and allowing my body to come into that alignment. Sometimes it takes longer and sometimes it's like a click in moment. It makes me think of a sovereignty or showing up as a sovereign being as well. Like, how am I regulating myself? There's so many aspects. It's not just one answer. And I'm just trying to capture a little piece of the unveiling of what is present and what is gifted to all of us as human beings. But how can we allow to be with self firstly? And then regulate it, sovereign, connect with self, healthy boundaries, and then as well out there. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's so much and it's so simple and so complex at the same time.
And also if you add to that, like when you want to follow your intuition, what that other woman just said, it's not always 100% spot on. So you think, your intuition says, let's take a right turn. And if you're alone, you would just take a right turn. But it makes you a little bit shy to say that to other people, because what if it's one of those times you're wrong? So it just gets, it's not always so easy and simple, as we say, like how to follow it when you're alone or how to follow it when you're with other people, the whole other thing. Let's say you want to change your airplane ticket. Yeah, after the fact, it's great. You found out the plane crashed or blah, blah, but you don't know before.
Tom, I have a question for you. Sorry, go. So when you're working with a client, I sometimes see that people have symptoms that might lead the person to think that they are highly sensitive or empath. But it's really more about a trauma response of hyper awareness and hyper arousal or hypoarousal, but usually I think it's more experienced as hyper arousal. How do you I know that it's a long process, but have you found like key pointers of how to differentiate one from the other? I know that sometimes people have both things and then you have to separate both, but could you speak a little bit on that, please?
Who are you asking? I'm sorry.
You.
Oh, good. Glad I was paying attention. You know, the idea of somebody with trauma, God, I've opened up space with people, especially a couple, and I've structured it so they feel a deep level of intimacy in a moment. And it blew up in my face where the person began to decompensate. And so I'm backed up with appointments and I got to put this person back together. I can't just throw them out of my office. But then later that night, I'm going, shit, pay attention. So I'm a little more careful. If their history says a lot of trauma, I'm testing out the strength of that bridge, because I'd say there's been at least a good 3 blow-ups. I've told Larry this in the past, that I made a mess and then I had to put it back together. So, you know, it isn't always a panacea. There's some people that you got to be very, very careful of. You're unearthing a volcano of feeling at times. You know, if we cry over a video, you can imagine somebody with a lot of trauma and you touch them that deeply, what it's going to unearth. So did I answer most of the question?
What I understand is just check the range.
Yeah. And check their history. Just unmute and speak if you want to speak.
I've never seen your presentation about the relationship. Can you say just a little bit about that? And did you do another one of these meetups that it's, you know, like a recording is available to look back and meet up, or you might be doing one in the future or something with your
Are you familiar with Jeff
relationship?
Saltzman's work? Are you
I'm
familiar with
not.
Jeff Saltzman? Okay, I'll find the link, but I've done 3 interviews with Jeff Saltzman where it covers pretty much the, you know, a lot of my earlier basis of my work. And he's a great interviewer. He's so good at pulling out everything people know, but let me find the link for you.
JEFF.
His show's called The Daily Evolver. You can find it on YouTube. Or...
And then he interviewed you, Tom?
Yeah. So let me find it. And I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, here it is, Daily Evolver. Okay, here it comes.
Okay, thank you. And also there's this whole like cultural creatives, I think, which is also part of the HSPs.
So for my videos, look around Valentine's Day, go back the last couple of years, and you should find 3 of them. And try to watch them in succession, it'll make more sense.
Okay, thank you.
So we're coming up over an hour and 5 minutes post-meeting. Are we running out of energy? I'm gonna have to leave in a minute anyways. Christine's making me dinner. Any final thoughts?
Just thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think a big takeaway is, Tom is saying, is look at HSP as a gift. That's a positive thing.
Yeah.
Not that it's easy, not that there's no messiness to it or confusion in it and whatnot, but try to frame it as a good thing. This pretty much goes for any maybe quality that we have that many people don't recognize as a good thing. We're going to see the good aspects of it, or the functional, the healthy aspects of it, and to heal it, to grow it, to all that. And so that's the big takeaway for me, is HSP is not a negative territory. It's a positive territory, when we, especially when we learn to frame it that way and then do the work that helps that flow in a good way.
Good summary. So hopefully I'll see all of you in 13 days at IEC 2021. And then the next meetup we're going to do, if you have a good experience at IEC and you want to present, we're going to pick 5 or 6 people to do a brief presentation of what resonated for you at the conference. Last year, I wrote up a blurb and I posted it all on the international websites. We got a lot of hits. So either way or the other, thanks for being here, and come back. It's second Saturday of every month we do this, and this has been really growing in the last year. And we really like the international flavor we're getting. That's why we're going to do one at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So in Europe, it's only 9 o'clock at night, midnight to 2 o'clock in the morning. So I'm going to sign off. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tom.
Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
For further information, including upcoming events, resources, links to our Facebook and Meetup pages, and our fabulous donate button, please visit our website at sandiegointegral.org. Donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue to provide information and connection within the Integral community.